I was leaned up against my face down. He was holding my face down with one of his hands. And he took his gun out and he placed it against my head. And he raped me. He had sexual intercourse with me.
This is Jimmy Fennell, ex-Texas policeman and now convicted kidnapper and rapist. Jimmy Fennell finally got caught and went to prison in 2008 for kidnapping and sexually assaulting a woman while on police duty. This violent attack was recently recalled by Fennell's victim.
After he was done, he put me back into the patrol car and told me that if I ever told anybody that when he got out of prison, he would hunt me down and he would kill me.
In 1996, Jimmy Fennell's fiance, Stacy Stites, was found tortured and killed on a rural road. Rodney Reed, a local man, was eventually arrested and convicted of the crime and is facing imminent execution for Stacy's murder. However, a close examination of the physical evidence, court testimony, and newly gathered information from eyewitnesses indicates that Jimmy Fennell was the person who was the real killer of Stacy Stites. More shockingly, new evidence indicates that Fennell had help from other police officers in covering up for the gruesome murder of Stacy Stites and the framing of Rodney Reed, an innocent man. By all accounts, Jimmy Fennell was a vicious, dangerous human being. Before and during the Stacy Stites murder trial, Jimmy Fennell was facing 5 separate charges in Giddings, Texas for police brutality. In one case, Fennell handcuffed 19-year-old Mario Murillo, forced him to his knees, and held a service revolver to his head. In addition, a woman who Fennell started to pursue less than a month after Stacy's funeral filed an affidavit against Fennell stating, "Jimmy didn't say black people. He used the N-word. The N's were all bad, all on drugs, all crooks." Jimmy Fennell. This was the man whose testimony was used as the entire foundation of the Stacy Stites murder trial. Jimmy Fennell, avowed racist and convicted rapist, was and continues to be deemed credible by the courts. At trial, Fennell said he had never known or met Rodney Reed. In fact, Jimmy Fennell approached Rodney Reed 2 weeks before Stacy Stites was murdered, angrily confronting Reed about Stacy.
What made me mad and hurt me, he told Rodney, "You gonna pay." So we took it as a threat. I said, "Who was it?" He said, "That's Stacy's husband, Fennell." I said, "You mean finna be husband, boyfriend, all the same. They finna get married. But she really don't want to marry him. She want to have a life."
A crucial part of the state's prosecution was, and still is, the claim that Stacy Stites and Rodney Reed had never met before the day of Stacy's death. As recently as January 2014, a U.S. court affirmed this position. The lack of evidence of an actual relationship between Stites and Reed defeated Reed's assertion of innocence. This is one of the many witnesses who saw Stacy Stites with Rodney Reed. Like many others in this case, she continues to fear retribution from the local police and has asked that her identity be disguised. How many times did you personally see Rodney and Stacy together?
I've seen them about 4 or 5 times. Down there by the community center at night, they be sitting out there talking and stuff. Then I used to see them riding through the old road all the time together.
Did you know her name to be Stacy?
Yeah, I knew Stacy.
How did you know her name?
Because when I go to the store, she work at HEB, she got that big old name tag on there. Mm-hmm. I used to let her wait on me all the time because she was nice. I liked Stacy.
To this day, the courts refuse to believe that Stacy Stites and Rodney Reed had a relationship of any sort, despite the following people stating they knew a relationship existed. Anonymous witness number 1, Sandra and Walter Reed, Linda Westmoreland, Roderick, Richard, and Shantae Reed, Chris and Tanya Aldridge, Rose Raxton, Alyssa Allen, Elizabeth Keener, Iris Lindley, Julia Estes, Joy Montfort, and James Robinson. According to James Robinson, who is a U.S. Navy veteran, "I saw Stacy Stites and Rodney Reed on many occasions. They would kiss and call each other baby."
Why didn't you testify? Why were you not comfortable in testifying for Rodney?
No.
Why?
I don't want to get involved because I don't want nothing to happen to my family.
You think
or me.
And you think the police department would have actually done something done something?
They'd have picked at my nephews and stuff until they lock them up and stuff. Yeah.
You were afraid of the Bastrop Police Department?
Mm-hmm, still is.
And you're not very comfortable giving us this information, are you?
Nope.
Rodney Reed was fully aware of the dangers posed by some of the local police, especially Jimmy Fennell. Here's Reed recalling an alarming conversation he had with Stacy.
He was angry because he did know. He knew, and she told me that if he actually found out, her words to me was that he would kill her.
In court, Jimmy Fennell testified he and Stacy never argued in public. However, in April of 1996, the month of Stacy's murder, a witness named Rich Scroggins saw Jimmy Fennell verbally attacking Stacy in a public Bastrop parking lot.
He was literally red in the face and screaming. He was absolutely in a rage, yelling, "You lying fucking bitch," just over and over again, completely out of control. What she was saying was, this is where I work. Let's take this home. Let's not do this here. To me, it was so chilling because of, the way he was acting. I couldn't get it out of my mind. But I remember when I saw the picture of the two of them, I said, well, that's, those are the two people that I saw.
In terms of your percentage of certainty that those were the two people that you saw, how would you gauge that?
Well, I'd say it was 100%.
Scroggins is one of the many witnesses who was never interviewed by any lawyers or investigators.
I do know that it was 1996. I do know that it was April, and I do know that it was a Monday.
Jimmy Fennell has clearly demonstrated the character and temper to commit a violent crime such as murder. He was never fully investigated for Stacy's death. Why? For most of 1995, Jimmy Fennell worked in the Bastrop County Sheriff's Department before he moved to Giddings. Carol Stites, Stacy's mom, testified at trial that Jimmy has 900 friends that work with the Bastrop County Sheriff's Department to keep him informed about everything. One of these close friends was Curtis Davis, Jr. Davis was identified by Rodney Reed as the passenger who accompanied Jimmy Fennell on the day Fennell confronted Rodney about Stacy. On the night of Stacy's murder, before Stacy was reported missing, Curtis Davis left work 1 hour into his shift. According to his time card that night, the reason given for Davis's early departure was a broken tooth. That same night, the night of Stacy's murder, Jimmy Fennell was seen with 3 other police officers outside of 1611 Cedar Street, 2 blocks from Bastrop High School.
On that particular night, I noticed that my dog had been barking. And upon me getting up to see what he was barking for, I noticed that it was a man standing outside by the mailbox. And I sit up and I noticed that one of them was Ed Samella, Jimmy Fennell, David Board, and Rocky Warlow. And I'm like, what are they doing outside? It was kind of strange for them to be outside, late at night or whatever. Rocky Warlow, he was my son's coach. Rocky Warlow, I know for a fact, he had on the dress shirt with the jeans, and he had on a cowboy hat.
The next day, news stories broke about Stacy's murder.
They called the boyfriend in turn, the fiance rather, and he put out an all-points bulletin on his truck, and they did track that truck down about 5:30 this morning here in Bastrop at Bastrop High School.
Jimmy's abandoned truck, which Stacy's corpse was in, was found in the nearby Bastrop High School parking lot, 2 blocks from 1611 Cedar Street.
The next day it was like, bam, I'm right here on the main stretch, where all this took place, and it was like, I couldn't believe it. I was mostly in shock because I started putting things, okay, that's why they was outside.
This witness knew that she could not go to the local police with this information. This witness's information remains uninvestigated to this day.
From then to now, it's like a constant reminder. I could close my eyes and I could still see them standing out there. It's just continually in my mind. And I have to live with this daily.
Why was Jimmy Fennell talking with Rocky Wardlow, David Board, and Ed Salmela on the night of Stacy's murder? In his court testimony, Fennell said he was in his Giddings apartment with Stacy all night that night. Is it possible that 4 or more policemen knew about Stacy's death even before she was reported missing? Is it also possible that this is why the entire Stacy Stites murder investigation was questionable, suspicious, and incomplete from the very beginning? Under Ranger Rocky Wardlow's control and supervision, investigators were told not to search Jimmy and Stacy's apartment. Jimmy Fennell's truck, the same truck that was used to carry Stacy's dead body, was returned to Jimmy before important test results were completed. Stacy's belt, the suspected murder weapon, was never tested because it was polluted by attorneys and/or witnesses. A long list of other evidence was either not submitted or not tested. Other items, including Stacy's address book and daily planner, were retained by Rocky Wardlow. The contents of Stacy's personal items were never revealed by Ranger Wardlow. Officer Ed Salmela, the original lead investigator in Stacy's murder, ended up dead under suspicious circumstances 3 months after Stacy's death. Ranger Rocky Wardlow, Ed Salmela's former roommate, immediately ruled it a suicide. Ed Salmela's family members disagree with Rocky Wardlow's conclusion.
The investigation on my brother's death, I do not believe was handled correctly. I believe my brother got into something and found out way too much, is my feeling on my brother's case. And he was actually sitting back trying to figure out how to go and resolve this, and ended up not being in this world anymore.
Ranger Wardlow happens to be a personal friend of mine. He provides valuable resources to this agency as well as the sheriff's office.
This is David Board. David Board was one of the 3 officers with Jimmy Fennell on the night of Stacy's murder.
With the assistance of Rocky, who acts as a liaison between this agency and Department of Public Safety, makes for good relationship.
Officer Board also had complete custody of critical DNA evidence used against Rodney Reed. At trial, Sergeant Board recited a list of items he seized from Carolyn Rivas, Rodney Reed's girlfriend. Reed's girlfriend Carolyn never pursued or wanted to pursue any charges against Reed. Even though this case was dropped quickly, David Board never returned any of Carolyn's materials back to Carolyn. David Board kept these Carolyn Rivas items all to himself up until Rodney Reed's arrest 2 years later. David Board waited almost 1 year after Stacy's murder before he submitted the Rivas-Reed DNA for testing. Why did it take so long for an alleged match to be made between Stacy Stites and Rodney Reed? Why was Rodney Reed's DNA not tested immediately? Why did David Board sit on evidence for so long? Can we trust the DNA evidence that David Board controlled and used to link Rodney Reed to the murder of Stacy Stites? Is it possible there was some kind of cross-contamination or switching of DNA samples in the Stacy Stites murder investigation? Is it possible Rodney Reed's sperm fractions from Carolyn Rivas' belongings were mislabeled as a sample from Stacy Stites?
My thought process was, I'm just going to shake these trees up as hard as I can and maybe something will fall out.
This is Lisa Tanner, the Texas Attorney General's special prosecutor. Tanner is considered the best prosecutor in the state, and she was the lead prosecutor in Rodney Reed's trial. Lisa Tanner, with her partner, Special Investigator Missy Wolf, smoothly orchestrated the prosecution of Rodney Reed. Tanner sold the made-up story of Jimmy Fennell, Rocky Wardlow, and David Board to the all-white Bastrop jury. Yet, the railroading of Rodney Reed was not quite finished. During the punishment phase of Reed's trial, in which they sought the death penalty, prosecutors called 2 women to the stand whom they claimed Rodney Reed randomly attacked and raped. Both women had filed sexual assault charges in Bastrop years before, and both cases remained unsolved. Curiously, both cases had been investigated by Officer David Board, and Officer Board maintained custody of the DNA evidence and rape kits in each case. Sergeant Board pointed out in trial that this evidence was kept in a locked refrigerator and that only he had the combination. Though lab reports were presented at trial that allegedly connected Reed to both incidents, those tests and reports have been lost and are currently missing from court records. Did Sergeant David Board, who attended the FBI Academy, tamper with evidence in these 2 old cases to implicate Rodney Reed for rapes he did not commit? One of these two cases involved a 39-year-old woman identified here as VH. This woman claims she was attacked in Bastrop as she wandered, lost and drunk, on the railroad tracks. Two witnesses claim they saw VH on or near the railroad tracks with a man named Pat Barnett on the night of the incident. Bastrop resident David Lewis Taylor told us he saw VH and his close friend Pat Barnett together right by the railroad tracks in Bastrop on that night. That same night, another Bastrop resident, Iris Lindley, also saw her friend Pat Barnett and VH separated by a short distance from each other, walking back to town on the railroad tracks. According to VH's own court testimony, she had heard that Pat Barnett was bragging in town that he had sex with her that night. Was VH given a special deal by prosecutors for her testimony and continued cooperation in Rodney Reed's trial? Records indicate VH has a long criminal history in Bastrop County. And, alarmingly, VH had a serious aggravated assault charge dropped by the judge and prosecutor exactly 2 weeks after Rodney Reed received his death sentence. The other old case that was in David Board's possession involved the September 6, 1989 rape of a 12-year-old girl in Bastrop. First, Reed was living hundreds of miles away from Bastrop at the time, and he has an alibi for the entire date of this incident. Secondly, after the rape, the 12-year-old victim identified her attacker as another man, convicted sex felon James Slaughter, who lived in the same apartment building as the victim. Slaughter was eventually charged with sexual assault of a child in 1990 and convicted of another sexual assault in 1994. Reed has never been given the opportunity to defend himself against these charges. Again, can the DNA evidence that was controlled by Officer David Board in these two cases be trusted? And the DNA tests that prosecutors presented at trial are now missing. Their status remains unknown, and they cannot be retested using modern standards. Strangely, near the end of Rodney Reed's trial, Megan Clement, one of the prosecution's important DNA experts, testified about various allegations that have been brought throughout the country about DNA sample switching. Concerning how her company LabCorp received and processed DNA samples, Clement went on to say, "We can only go by what they, the Austin Crime Lab, had labeled those samples and what they said those samples were from." This testimony from Megan Clement raises big questions concerning DNA chains of custody and the possibility of mislabeling samples. We have presented just a few of the many questions and holes in the death penalty case against Rodney Reed. Many other troubling issues exist, such as an erroneous and incomplete medical examiner's report, lack of a verifiable chain of custody with Stacy's body, incompetent and extensive corruption of key public figures, including the felony conviction of Richard Hernandez, who was the Bastrop County Sheriff during Reed's arrest and conviction. How much more evidence do the courts need to reopen Rodney Reed's case? Will he ever be set free? Or will he be executed soon?
So far, it's been 17 years. 17 long years. I haven't been able to touch my son or to just give him a kiss. For 17 long years, no Christmas, no birthdays. We are wanting my son to come home where he belongs. He is an innocent man.
As far as executions, I try my best to keep that out of my mind. I'm not looking in that direction, you know. I'm seeing my children. I want to, be with my family. That's what I'm looking at.
Will Stacy Stites' real murderer be released in September 2018, when Jimmy Fennell is scheduled to be set free from prison in Venus, Texas? One of Fennell's victims prays he is never released.
I'm actually still afraid for my life to this day. I fight the parole board every single year to not let him out. I have nightmares at night. I constantly look over my shoulder. I'm 26 years old, and I can't be at home at night alone because I'm afraid that he's standing outside my house. All I can picture is a gun to my head and the last things he said to me.
How many other violent crimes did Jimmy Fennell commit before he was caught? And how many more people will he hurt in the future? Will anyone cover up for Jimmy Fennell next time?